Good evening, everyone. This formal meeting of the Board of Education for December 16, 2014 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on PPS TV Services website. Directors Morton and Curler are absent this evening. Superintendent Smith, are you ready for the superintendent's report?
You bet. So last week, Portland Public Schools, along with Work Systems and Portland Community College, hosted a national convening for programs and organizations across the country whose focus is reconnecting young people with school. And Portland was chosen to host the conference in part because of our work to reconnect students in coming back to school. And you heard at our December 2nd board presentation from our Multiple Pathways department from Karina Wolf on our Reconnect campaign and the number of students that we've pulled back into Portland Public Schools with a door-knocking campaign. We had 40 school districts, 250 people, and a number of state departments of education at the conference. I got to serve on a panel with Mayor Hale, Secretary of State Kate Brown, PCC President Jeremy Brown, and myself dialoguing with the conference attendees about re-engaging kids in school. And I just wanted to say congratulations to everyone who was involved in this conference. It was really successful, and I think people really enjoyed being here in Portland and getting to visit our programs. So that was a great thing. Many of our schools participated in the Global Hour of Code activities last week, including Sabin K-8 School, where students at all grade levels engaged in computer programming activities. So coding is big at Sabin, where our parent Helen Kilber and tech teacher Claudia Tautfest earned a $10,000 grant to fuel computer programming in the school. We had kindergartners learning entry-level coding on iPads, 4th and 5th graders busy building games through code.org in the school's computer lab. We had the state labor commissioner, Brad Avakian, who came out to just recognize the value of students learning to code and the rapidly expanding demand for computer programs in the workplace. So thank you to Sabin staff, students, parents, and partners for demonstrating the power of code. I wanted to do a shout out to Steve Griffith. Steve served on our school board from 1987 to 1955 and recently retired from Stoll Reeves. Steve received the Oregon State Bar Association's President's Public Service Award for the work that he's done in our high schools, coaching the Constitution teams, which he's done since that started with the Classroom Law Project, especially at Lincoln High School. But he's been a huge energy and just driving force for our district, having the presence it has, and we've won national championships with our Constitution teams multiple times. So congratulations, and it was fun to be there and watch him be acknowledged. We also, as we talk about our Constitution teams, we had Amanda Alonzo, who teaches history at Madison High School and won the 2014-15 Civic Educator of the Year from the Classroom Law Project. Here's a photo of her receiving the award with Madison Principal Petra Callan. Last year, Amanda pulled together the first Constitution team at Madison High School. The team won a Unit 6 award at the state competition, which is great for a first-year team. Amanda's known as a great civic leader and role model for her students, and we wanted to extend congratulations to her. And I'm going to just say, can we just do a little? Along with Amanda's outstanding work, other great things are happening at Madison. The school now has some amazing STEM offerings in addition to a strong and broad arts program. On the screen, you can see some of the promotional materials that our staff, along with Madison parent Brian Rupp, created to tell the good news from Madison. The school also held an open house for 8th graders December 11th, which was a night of the big windstorm, and despite the bad weather, 200 parents and students came out for the event. So, yahoo, Madison. So Franklin High School modernization begins this summer, and that means for 2 years Franklin students will attend school on the Marshall campus. More than 500 prospective students and family members turned out for the December 4th Discover Franklin, the school's 8th grade information night, which was held at the Marshall campus so that families could see the campus. Franklin staff, students, and parents pulled out all the stops. Families were met by a drum line, followed by a dance performance in the auditorium. Banners in multiple languages welcomed families, and administrators, teachers, and coaches gave overviews of Franklin's academic and athletic offerings. Congratulations to the dozens of cast of dozens from the school and central office who worked to make the evening such a successful event. And we've been busy modernizing the Franklin campus, and actually new carpeting, just like the building is looking beautiful, and the Franklin signs are now up on the front of the building. So it's looking good and getting ready for Franklin students. The PPS Transportation Department wanted to be more involved in our 3 priorities and came up with an idea to help with the goal of ensuring that all our students are reading at the end of 3rd grade. Their idea was to put books on our buses. They developed a plastic pouch filled with pockets and books to go over the seats, and John Appleton was buying books for the pouches at Tidal Wave used bookstore when a library worker overheard and said the Multnomah County Library would be happy to help supply your buses with free books. I know, isn't this a great partnership? So this partnership between our transportation department and Multnomah County Library has now expanded to 38 buses, and the bus drivers report that kids love reading a book on the ride, and some of the older students have been seen reading to our younger students. So I just want to say thank you for that great partnership. And also for just the creativity of our central departments, figuring out how they are able to be engaged in and support the our 3 big goals as a district. So starting in late January, Portland Public Schools will be providing an important opportunity for families and students to share their experiences in our schools. This is the Successful Schools Survey, which will focus on school climate, and you've been hearing us talk about this at board meetings. Questions will include items like whether you feel welcomed in your child's school, in what ways your child's learning is or is not supported, and how safe your school feels. The surveys are filled out anonymously. Overall survey results will be shared with the community and used to shape individual school improvement plans. The survey will be available online in English, Chinese, Somali, Spanish, Russian, and Vietnamese from January 20th through February 28th. Through our survey partner, Oregon's Kitchen Table, and the PSU Policy Consensus Center. The goal is to provide PPS administrators, principals, and teachers with transparent and comprehensive data that measures the differential experience and perceptions of PPS students and families in our schools. You'll start to see posters this week, and we'll be hearing more about the survey. Please help spread the word. We are really looking for a high level of participation in this survey because the data will be used to inform a lot of the work that we do here at PPS. And then finally, many of our schools are involved in doing service projects this time of year and providing our students with the opportunity to meet the needs of their communities while learning the transformative power of giving. Benson students in the tech algebra class have started a printing business as a way to learn and apply algebraic principles. They used their special printer to create 140 Christmas stockings and filled each with a toothbrush and toothpaste, as well as donated toys through a toy drive sponsored by Doc Martin Shoes. They piled into the Max train with their boxes of stockings and toys and headed to the KGW TV station, where they donated to the KGW Great Toy Drive. Thanks to the Benson Alumni Association and Portland Workforce Alliance for the monetary contributions that supported this effort, and Tim Haraishu and Kayla Stolt for their innovative teaching. And hey, nice job, Benson. And actually, you'll see creative efforts on behalf of students all over the district, both doing things that benefit other students in their school or their greater community. I got a chance to visit with a group of girls at George Middle School who organized a December coat and clothing drive because they noticed kids in their own school and in their community didn't have coats for the cold weather. They are part of a club called GIVES, Girls Investing in Volunteering, Equity, and Service, that was started by their school secretary, Leticia Cortines. I'm proud of our students and our schools for doing these kind of things, and they're really inspiring. So I'm going to show you a short video from the GIVES Club.
You ready? clothes for the people who are needed, like the homeless and stuff.
And we want to change that so that everybody could be warm this winter.
Thank you. I love helping others because I get sad when I see people, you know, that don't have as much. So I try to help as much as I can by donating my clothes and helping other people.
So we're doing this because I see people around the community that need help because they don't have any winter coats or anything.
And you feel like you're making a difference?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, one last little bundle of coats for you.
I just like the fact of volunteering. It seemed really fun to me.
You have really inspired me tremendously, and I really love just seeing what kind of initiative you've taken to make it. And I did get some pictures. And then the final thing I just want to acknowledge is following the shooting that took place outside of Rosemary Anderson High School this week. A number of things. One is just the power of that community of providing a really safe space for our students, and that's where our students wanted to be. Even the students who had been injured, where they wanted to be after they were released from the hospital was back at that school. We've had a tremendous outpouring from the community coming to just law enforcement and members of the community just really wrapping their arms around Rosemary Anderson. So just a great thank you to the staff and the students at Rosemary Anderson and to everyone else who has reached out and really wrapped their arms around during a really just traumatic event. But boy, the community building and the power of just being together as a community has really been amazing. And just thank you to everyone whose heart has been with the families and the students and the staff at Rosemary Anderson.
Thank you, Kyle. At this time, we'll have student testimony. Ms. Houston, is there?
We have
one student?
Madeline Angeli.
And here she comes. So I'm going to go ahead and read the instructions about public comment while you're getting all settled there, okay? You can just have a seat right there, either chair. Thank you for taking the time to attend the meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and reflections and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen and reflect on your comments, and we won't be responding to any comments or questions during public comment. But we've asked our board manager, Roseanne Powell, who's sitting right over here, to follow up with you if you have any questions or for the board. Guidelines for public comment and public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. Complaints about individual employees are directed to the superintendent's office. So you have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spell your last name. For the first 2 minutes of your testimony, there'll be a green light that comes on in front of you. When you have 1 minute left, the yellow light will come on, and when your time is up, the red light will come on and a buzzer will sound, and then we'll ask you to wrap up right about then, okay? We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments right then, all right? And again, thank you very much for being here tonight. We always love it when students come and testify.
Happy to be here. Okay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I'm Madeline Angeli, A-N-G-E-L-I, and I'm a junior at Lincoln High School, and I'm here today on behalf of myself and a group of students to present our project to you. Our assignment was to take something that we were passionate about and innovate it, and my group decided that we really wanted to innovate the bell schedule because Lincoln is a really unique school, and we thought that due to our size, our location, our programs offered, that we would benefit from a bell schedule that was a little more specialized to the needs of our school and our students. And so we started this process by talking to a bunch of people. We talked to parents and students and teachers, administration. We talked to our union reps to see what the concerns would be there, and we talked to our IB coordinator to see kind of what the program requirements would be on that front. And we came up with some interesting information. The parents and the union reps were concerned about shifts in the start and end times of a school day. So we decided pretty early on to keep that pretty stable. And the students were really concerned with their lunchtime getting cut short because we have a really small cafeteria and we're an open campus, so a lot of students go off. And our lunchtime was reduced by over 10 minutes this year, which really, students were really feeling the crunch in getting off campus and then back on in time for school. So a lot of students were concerned about that. And then our flex time, which is a 40-minute chunk in the day. Last year we had it twice a week, and this year we're down to once a week. And students used it to meet with teachers and to work collaboratively on projects, to retake tests, and to just generally benefit themselves as learners. And then the teachers were primarily concerned with a schedule that allowed their A-Day kids to stay on track with their B-Day kids, so that there wouldn't be the fact that, like, for example, tomorrow all the B-Day classes are going to be 10 minutes behind. And so we took this data and we created a survey, and we had 326 students take the survey, and 83% of them said that they preferred a 2-flex schedule, so we really wanted to prioritize that in the schedule we made. So I gave copies to Ms. Husson for you all to look at, but we decided on an 8-period alternating block schedule. It starts at 8:15 and ends at 3:15, just like it does now, but there are no full 8 days and no 2-hour late openings, and there are 2 flex periods a week. It exceeds the 130 hours. It gives you 130 and a half, and it far exceeds the total 990. It gives you 1,444 total classroom hours over an 178-day school year. Ideally, we'd put the 10-minute break back into the schedule between the first and second period of the day, but we, in talking with our union reps, understood that that would require a union contract exception, and so we took that out of our proposed schedule. So, thank you.
Is all of it?
Yeah,
Great.
most of it.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other student? That's the only student, right? Okay. Mina, would you like to go ahead and give us a student representative report?
So, dear members of the board, Superintendent Smith, and the public, thank you for letting me speak tonight. So, about 2 weeks ago, SuperSAC, which is the Superintendent's Advisory Council, hosted a leadership forum in which we invited students from across the district to come together to discuss leadership skills. So we had about 30 students from across the district come out, and it was a great event. We talked about effective leadership and how to best plan assemblies, dances, how to run social media accounts. We have a slideshow of the Promise of Oregon photo booth, which was led by Larry Bingham, so thanks to him for coming out. And students enjoyed having their photo taken, and they've been shared over social media. Nice. Yeah, so these are all Roosevelt students we're seeing right here, and that's a Madison student. And those are all Madison student government leaders. Franklin, student government leader. Benson, student government leaders.
That's great.
Grant High School's ASB president. Lincoln's ASB president. Grant High School student leader. Yeah, so these are all students that came out, and as you saw, they are all wearing awesome t-shirts, which were designed by a group of Madison seniors. So I have t-shirts for you all.
For us? Yeah.
Yeah, you can get them after the meeting, but it was awesome that students at Madison who are interested in this were able to design the t-shirt. And it was an awesome event in general. I think students really benefited from it. Students went home having a better idea of effective leadership. And we hope to follow up on this in May, where we have our new student governments who get elected, who come out with the old student governments, and we all get to share, and then hopefully have some presentations from other leaders in the community.
That's great.
So thank you all so much.
That's good, Mina. Yeah, thank you.
Mina. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful that you're getting so many students involved.
Yeah, and it's awesome that so many students are involved. And now we have a Facebook group for all the students who came, so we have networking across all the PPS high schools for students to get involved, and students are already asking questions in there about upcoming dances and events, and it's really great just to see everybody communicating.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your work. Appreciate that. Okay, now we'll have public comment. Ms. Houston, would you go ahead and call the first two?
We have 6, and the first 2 speakers, Elsa Menendez and Neely Wells.
You can go ahead anytime.
My name is Elsa Menendez, E-L-S-A-M-E-N-E-N-D-U-C, and I am the parent of 2 native Spanish kids enrolled in the immersion program at Ainsworth, a program that was created in 1986 in an attempt to improve Ainsworth elementary law enrollment. 28 years later, in high demand, it is the only immersion program in the Lincoln cluster. Ainsworth is not located in a demographic area where there is a high native Spanish-speaking population. SACER has recommended to increase the percentage of native speakers. I help in my kids' class every week, and I have seen firsthand how native speaking kids are a valuable resource to the program. And I hope that PPS have a specific outreach plan to reach that population. I applaud your effort to make this program accessible to the historically underserved population of PPS. A city that is not proactive supporting their underserved population won't succeed. Ainsworth is not again in a demographic area where there is a high concentration of underserved students. SACER has recommended to reserve 45% of the lottery slots for those families. In order for that to be reachable, PPS most likely will need to bus students from other parts of the city. Is that the most viable solution? Another recommendation is changing the sibling preference in focus options school. This is not going to make a difference in the long run. PPS should want to make sure that parents are committed to their schooling in a capacity that they can. Dividing them won't help that important asset for the school. In my mind, the best solution comes from making all neighborhood schools strong, so everyone will want to attend their neighborhood school. I am aware that the dual language immersion department has an existing plan to expand the immersion programs, and that is what I think that PPS should focus their efforts. What happened 28 years ago at Ainsworth can be replicated to create successful programs throughout PPS. Make those programs available to all. That is equity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Neely Wells, W-E-L-L-S. I've been a member of SACER for nearly 6 years. However, nobody on the committee knows I'm going to say this, therefore I don't speak for SACER. I sit here today to tell you that I am deeply troubled, saddened, disheartened, and even embarrassed by the resolution as it reads in this board packet. It is only fair to say that it is my strong belief that we are a part of large improvements to the enrollment and transfer system, and that great things can happen as a result of the joint work that has occurred. And you all haven't given your vote yet, so I don't know to whom exactly I'm addressing these specific concerns. I am here hoping to sway some votes. First, the recommendations have been greatly weakened by taking out the sentence that said all PPS students have the right to attend their neighborhood school. This sentence at the top of the policy is imperative to the whole enrollment and transfer policy and should be reinstated, although I would leave out the word all. Now, to spend a few minutes in the weeds. This is how your change in sibling preference looks to me. You all came to the understanding that we could have it all, that focus option slots would accommodate both siblings and kids enrolled in the free and reduced lunch program. I don't think that is a factual conclusion for every school, but probably it is true at Richmond. Having decided that, it was simple to say that deciding between sibling preference or preference for free and reduced lunch status was half dozen of one, 6 of the other. Here's where I feel shame about the decision to adjust the recommendation as you have. The PPS School Board adopted the Racial Educational Equity Policy in 2011. This last week, you have been grappling over who to privilege. You chose middle-class white families. I can think of no other way to see it. Rather than invoke a process supporting the fight towards racial equity and showing courageous intention and deep integrity to Black and brown and poor citizens of our city, you chose to give comfort and stability to people like us, middle-class white folks. I want to be clear, it is not the practicality, ability to operationalize, nor methods of implementation that worry me. I'm concerned about the message we are sending. Please stop patting yourselves on the back for your work on equity around enrollment and transfer. On this issue, you had a really low bar to hurdle, and you chose to walk around it, so that middle and upper class white people can clearly see that the status quo still exists. But you haven't voted yet, so you can still change your vote.
Thank you. Ms. Houston?
Alicia De La Schmidt and Gabrielle Mercedes Bolivar.
My name is Alicia Delashmutt. It's ALICIA-DELASHMUTT. First, I want to say thank you to Superintendent Carol Smith and our Portland Public Schools board members for hearing my testimony. Families more often than not come to the board angry, heartbroken, and outraged for injustice and inequities. In order to fulfill your chosen duty as PPS board members, you need to hear these stories, but this is not one of those stories. In the spirit of the holiday season, I want to share with you our current experience in PPS. I consider this story a gift of what is working. My daughter's name is Neva. She'll turn 13 early next year and is a 7th grader at Trillium Public Charter School. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first parent to think that my daughter is awesome. She's funny, she's caring, she's a learner, and she's one of the approximate 14% of PPS students that receive special education services. Neva's one of those students, the students that we talk about when we talk about inclusion. I've heard things like, well, inclusion can work for some students, maybe the high-functioning students, whatever that meaningless term refers to, but not those students, the low-incidence students with intellectual disabilities and maybe behavior issues. Neva is one of those low-incidence students. She's not a typical communicator, which means that she doesn't communicate like I'm doing right now with words. She has some vision processing impairment. She needs help with all activities of daily living. That means toileting, getting dressed, eating, getting herself safely from place to place, etc. And you want to know something crazy? She is fully included in her general education classroom, and guess what? She's thriving. And you know what else? Her being a part of every class, every day, is improving the learning and the teaching of the teachers and the students in the school with her. How can this be? Let me let you in on a little secret. While our charter school receives considerably less funding than our other neighborhood schools, an issue that I'll be back next year to talk to you about, they have a school that is rich in values. The vision statement on the school webpage states, "Our vision at Trillium is to create an inclusive, equitable, intellectually rigorous culture where knowledge is built through experience. Student and staff are expected to be empowered to reach their fullest potential." The deal is that when you start with those values and a shared inclusive vision, you start teaching and learning in a fresh way. The special education team supports, not supplants, the general education team. They work together to differentiate instruction and bring innovative ways for students to participate in assignments, ways that can be accessed by all students, not just my daughter. Inclusive education is supported thoroughly by co-teaching, professional development, regular communication, and creative flexibility, teaches teachers how to work with more complex students so that more students can be successful in the classroom, and this results in less push-out and less disparity. Sharing resources versus siloing them away builds stronger classrooms and stronger communities once our students graduate and build adult lives. This isn't general education or special education, it's just quality education. To us, education is inclusion, community, differentiation, universal design for learning, age-appropriate, rigorous, evolving general education curriculum, peer models, friends, neurodiversity. This school for us has been an example of a job well done. Sharing the expertise and resources available to us is truly a gift for everyone. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Gabrielle Mercedes Bolivar, B-O-I-V-A-R. Good evening, Superintendent Smith, PPS Board of Directors, and student representative. Tonight I am here to celebrate the success of my eldest child, the value of inclusion for all students, and an amazing new initiative in PPS. Jasper attends our neighborhood school and is in 6th grade at the Ockley Green campus of CJOG. This year, Jasper stood in front of all middle school students and gave a speech. My son gave a speech, who was nonverbal, entering preschool. Jasper gave a speech on the responsibility of positive student role models, of listening to other students and how supporting them to be successful and engaged in school. He wanted them to know that he is there to listen, to provide peer mentoring, and to find adult supports when needed. Adult supports and peer mentoring. Jasper entered into early intervention services during preschool with limited verbal skills and with a significant articulation and fluency deficit. Transitioning to kindergarten could have been the end of Jasper's story. He could have easily been assigned to a CB classroom for kids that experience autism. He could have easily been excluded from his general education peers that demonstrated age-appropriate speech modeling. We are fortunate to have the most amazing speech pathologist and autism specialist, Ms. Shelley Cockburn, who works for PPS. She believed in Jasper. She worked with him as a whole child, and she worked as the most important member of our IEP team to ensure that Jasper developed not only his speech fluency and articulation, but he learned how to reduce his anxiety around sensory overload, how to self-advocate and ask for adult assistance when needed, and how to partner him with appropriate peer mentors. Jasper has had the same best friend for 6 years, and they have been intentionally placed together in class as natural peer supports. Miss Shelley Cockburn is truly an unsung hero of PPS's Special Education Department. In addition to serving on the SACIT, I serve as the co-chair of the PPS Special Education Advisory Committee, SPEAC. Mary Pearson, PPS Special Education Director, our longest-standing special education director in a decade, has provided consistency and created a vision for all PPS students. She will be presenting before the board on January 6th on the new REACH 2020 model for the inclusion of students receiving special education and general education. REACH 2020 aligns to the PPS racial educational equity policy. All kids belong, all students can succeed. Mary Pearson has charged SPEAC with providing guidance on the implementation of REACH 2020. Inclusion is an evidence-based best practice and aligned with the universal design for learning. It encompasses the idea that students learn best not when segregated, but when fully integrated with their same-age peers. I support the new REACH 2020 plan for PPS. We have an opportunity to end the historic practice of excluding some students and working to integrate special education and general education as one. Jasper is now in 6th grade and an honor roll student at Ockley Green. He serves as a student rep for middle school government, and he continues to thrive socially, emotionally, and academically, now with the amazing supports of Mr. Dale Williams, the resource teacher at OG, and his general education teachers. But the foundation was built by Miss Shelley Cockburn, and I would like to thank her for believing in Jasper and providing services to him as a whole child. As an underrepresented minority, Jasper is a success of what a student can accomplish when fully supported in an inclusive education model. I hope that you will agree that REACH 2020 is best for all PPS students and aligns with the racial education equity policy. Special education is a service, not a place. REACH 2020 intends to increase inclusion for our most historically marginalized and excluded students in PPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you.
Our last two speakers, Rick Bowman and Mark Feldman.
You can go ahead anytime.
My name is Mark Feldman, F-E-L-D-M-A-N, and I'm the chair of PPS's Talented and Gifted Parent Advisory Council. Could my fellow TAGAC members in the audience please stand for a moment? I'm here tonight to highlight connections between the enrollment and transfer reviews, strengthening neighborhood schools, and improving TAG services. The district's 2012 survey of parents of TAG students found that except for Access Academy, PPS has no effective TAG services. Still, it appears that no one has seriously considered whether the changes to the lottery and transfer system being discussed have implications for our district's nearly 5,000 TAG-identified students. Part of the problem may be data. SACIT's preliminary report showed a low percentage of lottery applications were TAG students. But the authors missed a critical fact. PPS students are not universally tested for TAG identification until 2nd grade, yet most elementary school lottery openings were filled years before this testing. If we look only at middle school lottery applicants, however, we see that twice as many, more than 1 in 5, are TAG students. Another telling sign is that Access Academy had to turn away nearly 200 qualified TAG applicants this year. These suggest that TAG students are using transfers and the lottery as a way to seek missing TAG services. If our goal is strong neighborhood schools, we must strengthen this district's TAG services. TAG students in Portland do not receive instruction at their rate and level without substantial, sometimes heroic, levels of parent advocacy. Time constraints, language, and cultural barriers can make this intimidating or impossible for families of historically disenfranchised students. Students who are not met with appropriate academic challenge can tune out or act out. They are at higher risk for depression and misbehavior resulting in exclusion from school. PPS data shows that educational gains made by high-achieving non-white students and low-income students are lower than their peers. Last year, TAGAC approved a set of recommendations for bringing TAG services to all neighborhood schools. Students would study at their rate and level, even if that means they would study advanced curriculum beyond their grade level. None of these research-based measures involve pullouts or tracking. Teachers would have significant discretion to include non-identified TAG students so as not to depend solely on a TAG identification process that may underrepresent low-income students or students of color. I'd like to extend an invitation to all of you to come to one of our monthly meetings to discuss our recommendations in more detail. But until then, I'd like to ask for your help in ensuring that tag services will be addressed in the Successful Schools Climate Survey and the Growth and Equity Survey. I also respectfully request that the TAG Act be involved in future SACIT evaluation of enrollment and transfer policy, and we are given a chance to consult with DBRAC during their work. Strong neighborhood schools require strong TAG services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Excuse me. And thank you to everybody who testified. And again, if you have any questions or other information you want to leave for the board, our board manager, Roseanne Powell, is sitting here in the front row. So. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is our Males of Color Pledge. Last week, the board discussed adopting a resolution which would confirm the district's commitment to the intent and purpose of the racial educational equity policy and its call for urgency to address the achievement gap in our schools and across the nation. Tonight, the board will vote on the resolution. Superintendent Smith, do you have any comments you'd like to add?
No, no further.
The board will now consider Resolution 5004, Portland Public Schools Males of Color Pledge. Is there a motion? Moved. Second. Director Atkins moves and Director Buell seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 5004. Ms. Houston, do we have any citizen comment?
We do. We have two. Rania Ben-Safia and Richard Greenstead.
Good evening. You can start anytime you'd like.
Okay. My name is Rania Ben-Safia, B-E-N-S-A-F-I-A. Good evening. I am happy to see that last week you voted to support a pledge to support young men of color. I am glad the district has strongly worded racial equity policy. But when it comes to a real instance of a PPS principal racially profiling African American student, this district has not been willing to have a courageous conversation. This district has not been willing to stand up for the right of young men and women of color. My son is a 7th grader at a school in an office. How ironic that in a class called leadership, the principal of the school came in, asked the class about the teacher's stolen purse, and then began calling individual students out to the hall. My son noticed that the students being called out were all black. He wondered if he would be next, and he was. All 4 black students were called out of the class. No other students were called out of the class. To this day, the principal has never gone back into the class to address his mistake. He has not apologized for separating our students by race. He has not apologized for damaging all students by reinforcing stereotypes about crime and black young people. Racial profiling made my son scared, embarrassed, and hurt, and he lost trust in his school leader. So the district has a racial equity policy. How did the district employee demonstrate their commitment to racial equity? When we challenged the principal on this, he was willing to talk, but could not see how this was wrong. His supervisor did not see a problem with this. The ombudsman was confusing and gave us incorrect information about complaint policy. A month later, after call of many parents, the principal finally arranged what he called a community conversation, which allowed only 20 minutes for community members to speak. Many parents asked to continue this conversation. A month and a half later, no follow-up meeting has been called. When children do wrong, hurt, or do mistake, we teach them to take responsibility. The principal has yet to address this with black and white children in leadership class and explain why is it wrong to racially profile. But pledge and policy don't protect our children. And if you don't insist that school staff protect our children of color, you will not see significant engagement of parents of color. You will never see the achievement gap close. And if you are truly committed to racial equity, you must go beyond pledge and policy on paper and hold accountable the people who are hired to educate our children. Because PPS leadership choose not to enforce racial equity policies, the Federal Office of Civil Rights is now investigating the incident and PPS mishandling it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Richard Greenstead, Greenstead. In 2011, the board passed the Racial Education Equity Policy. Today, in 2014, you will pass the Males of Color Pledge. In early 2015, on January 13th, I look forward to the passing of policies that start the alignment of enrollment and transfer with the Racial Education Equity Policy. This shows progress. While much too slow for many students, it is progress. Please resist the urge to congratulate yourselves on this progress. Congratulations should be reserved for completion of a task and not a moment sooner. Moving forward, we need clearly defined minimum levels of service and offerings for every school and additional FTE allocation where it is needed most. The district-wide boundary review will require tough decisions, and I urge each of you to make those tough decisions. Any celebration now or during this journey is inconsiderate of the students that continue to be left behind. Save the celebration for when outcomes are verified that prove race is not a reliable indicator of achievement and success. I look forward to congratulating each of you for your work when and only when verified results are tangible. Please continue forward progression with resolve and without hesitation. All of our communities will be stronger as a result.
Thank you very much. Is there any board discussion on the resolution? We had quite a bit of discussion at the last meeting. Oh, Director Atkins?
Yeah, I think I would just acknowledge along the lines of the comments from our public here that this clearly, I think we all acknowledge is symbolic, as we mentioned last week, and so there's the work that needs to be done is the most important part, but that we wanted to make this symbolic statement.
That's great.
And stand in solidarity with other school districts and students around the country. So,
thank you.
And support.
Thank you. Others? Director Blau?
I just want to make sure that it's not symbolic. I know what you're saying, that we realize that there's a lot of work.
We're not trying to congratulate ourselves that we have accomplished.
But that in fact we are actually going to make sure that we implement elementary and middle school efforts to increase the pipeline to males of color, et cetera. So I know there's a semantics thing. And
yeah, thank you for clarifying.
And actually, I will say, because part of the discussion last week was the fact that we're building an implementation plan, and that what we have is an overall strategic plan that speaks to all of our students. We have an equity plan where we're really drilling down in terms of our students of color and how we're meeting their needs. And then this in particular, we're disaggregating data specifically by gender and looking and language, so that we're really saying how is every single school focused on the needs of our males of color, and where we've got a significant gap across all of our schools. So how are we being strategic and very personal in the strategies to meet their needs? So focused on action.
Great. And I'm looking forward to seeing that plan. I saw a little bit of it at Council of Great City Schools. Looking forward to seeing it more. And then, of course, we also have our budget discussions that we'll have that really is where the rubber meets the road. And
correct.
Are we providing the resources to implement the things that need to be done? So the board will now vote on Resolution 5004. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution 5004 is approved by a vote of 5-0 with Student Representative Jeswell voting yes. Great. Thank you. Okay, at this time we'll have the first reading for the enrollment and transfer policy. Almost 2 years ago, the Board of Education asked the superintendent and her advisory committee on enrollment and transfer to align the enrollment and transfer policies to the racial educational equity policy. After 18 months of hard work, SACIT shared their recommendations with the superintendent and with the board on November 10th. The superintendent then presented her recommendations to the board on November 25th. After a town hall and 2 public hearings, the board held discussions on the proposal. Staff has amended the policy based on conversations that the board has had at the last 2 meetings and tonight. And we'll have a first reading excuse me, of the proposed enrollment and transfer policy. Superintendent Smith, will you please walk us through this policy?
I will. So what you have is actually a red line version of the policy, and I'll walk through what the significant changes are that are part of that. So the first is that building an equitable neighborhood-to-neighborhood transfer system, and the revisions to the policy end the neighborhood-to-neighborhood lottery system and support the strengthening of our neighborhood schools. The second thing is it provides a preference rather than a weight for students who are eligible for free and reduced meals and Head Start programs in the admission lottery for focus option schools. Creating this preference provides greater access for historically underserved students to our focus options. The third major policy change is it allows special education students who've been required to transfer to a school other than their neighborhood school to stay there until the highest grade. So those are the three main things that are reflected in the red line version of the policy change. In addition to the outlined policy changes, the following implementation components are necessary to align with the racial educational equity policy. First, was strengthening the petition transfer process, so adding staff and additional training to support the expected increase in petitions, as well as an improved tracking system. Second, initiating a review of focus option programs, conducting the reviews called for in our educational options policy. And then third, increasing the percentage of admission slots set aside for native language speakers in both the Richmond Japanese immersion and Ainsworth Spanish immersion programs. So those were the supporting actions to support the policy change. And then based on the board's discussion at the December 9th work session, the attached policy places the preference for co-enrolled siblings above the preference for students who qualify for free and reduced price meals or who qualify for Head Start pre-kindergarten, for applicants to focus option schools and programs. The revision also include a description of a process for reviewing the results of lottery preferences and clarification regarding when the preference for low-income students would take effect. So that's in essence what's embodied in the policy change.
Okay. After the proposed policy will be posted on the board website, and public comment period is 21 days, with the last day to comment being January 6, 2015. If you need more information, public comment will be posted with contact information for public comment will be posted with the policy. The board will hold a second reading of the policy on January 13, 2015. We're not having board discussion tonight on this because it's already been read and done. Well, because it's a first reading and we don't usually do it. Did you have something you wanted to say, Steve?
Several questions.
Well,
and
okay.
Has somebody done a motion to make it the first reading? No one's resolved it.
It just is the first reading. I'm doing the first reading right now. We just did it. If you would like some.
If we're talking, let me see if I can get this straight now. This is the first reading.
Yes.
And on the second reading, that will be.
That's when we vote.
It's also when we do the resolution.
Yes, that's correct.
So we do a resolution.
We don't do the resolution tonight.
I'm trying to get around this, the first reading. Now, my understanding of the policy is you do a resolution, and then you come back for another reading of that resolution for the final vote. But you don't do a resolution. I mean, you need to do a resolution this evening in order to have a first reading. Somebody has to have a resolution. It's a first reading put forward by the board, and I appreciate very much the superintendent coming forward with her material, but this has to now be resolved by someone on the board. I mean, make a resolution, and it needs to be and be seconded in order for it to be a first or second reading or whatever. And then also, when would you make amendments to this?
So I'm happy to have.
And Jolly's sitting right there if you want to call her up.
Yeah, I think we need Jolly up here because I think the understanding was that this was the first reading. And
Ms. Patterson, can you come on down and straighten this out for first reading? My understanding is that we do the first reading and there isn't a resolution tonight. The resolution is next week. But happy to go ahead and have you set it out.
Next month.
Excuse me, in the next meeting.
Good evening, I'm the General Counsel for the District, Jolly Patterson, and that is correct. The longstanding process for policy adoptions has been that there is a first reading of the policy, at which point there's no resolution that the board needs to vote on, because that's essentially providing the public with knowledge and information that the board will be voting on the policy at some point in the future. It then stays open for a minimum of 21 days, and then at the second reading is generally when the board will vote on the adoption of the policy via resolution.
I ask a question.
Yep, sure, go ahead.
Now, you said practice, but what does the policy state?
The policy states that.
The
that
policy
there's-
states specifically that there's no resolution on the first reading.
There's nothing for the board to vote on the first reading, because the board isn't voting to adopt. So yes, that the first reading, the board isn't voting on anything on the first reading, so there wouldn't be any reason to have a resolution.
How does it get before the board how does this policy get before the board itself from the board? This came from the superintendent, but the superintendent's not a member of the board. Doesn't somebody in the board have to put forward the policy itself?
And I'm going to just clarify, this does not reflect my recommendation. This reflects your discussion.
Yeah, exactly, I
Yeah,
understand
okay.
that, but somebody from the board then needs to put forward this as a first reading, doesn't it? Do you have the policy there? Did you bring that up? Could you read the policy? Would that be okay?
So this is in the administrative directive.
Oh, I was talking about the policy on the first and second reading stuff.
So I don't know that the policy gives this level of detail.
There's a policy that talks about that you have to go through a certain process for anything that spends money, where the board makes a resolution to spend money. That's in the policy.
This is
Could
not
you
a
find that
resolution to
and
spend
read
money,
that?
Director
Well,
Buell.
we're going to spend a lot of money on this.
But this is not a resolution to spend money. That comes in our budget recommendation.
We're also, but the superintendent has said that this is going to cost us more money.
But the board
And we-
actually votes on the budget, which spends,
Printing
causes our
paper, we're printing
expenditures.
paper and spending money, we're spending money all over the place on this
Really,
resolution.
This comes before the board on a first reading because we've noticed the public. And so this
like
the
that.
purpose of this is to let the public know that we're going to have this first reading, and then at the second reading, we'll have the resolution, and we'll have discussion, and then we will vote on the resolution, which includes the policy change.
And we'll be able to have as many questions that you would like on it and make
Sure.
amendments and so forth, and on as a major deal on the second reading.
If we were to do that, then we would have to go back to a first reading, and that's part of what we've been talking about
That's
the last
exactly
couple
my
of
point.
times we
When
discussed
would you
this.
make amendments?
Well, I thought that's what we were talking about last week.
We did that. We
at our
did talk
meeting
about that
week.
last time at our meeting, that the idea was that at this point in time, at the end of the last meeting, the staff had a fairly good idea about where the board wanted the policy to be, and they drafted that up, and that comes in as first reading. If there are changes made, and if they are substantial changes, then we'll have to go back and do another first reading. But my hope is that you were clear in your discussion last week with the staff. And if you're not, then we need to know about it so that we can see if it's a substantial change, so that we'll have to go back and do it another first reading. That's why we had all the discussion last week.
In all due respect, that's
Steve.
kind of screwy, because
Well, that's the
unless
policy.
you bring forward how it's actually written
That's
and
what
the
we have.
actual writing of it, you can't really comment and ask questions. It's kind of like our old board discussions that we wanted to have, the discussions for the budget ahead of when we actually saw the budget. Actually, this week, before the
Director Buell,
previous-
this is the way we've been doing first readings on every one of our policies since you've been on the board. This is not a different, way of doing first readings or second readings.
I don't read it like
That's
that.
what last week was. I mean, that's the whole, I think we said it multiple times that in order to keep this on track, in order to be able to have these changes in place in time for this year's transfer cycle, we need to start, this is the last possible moment that's why last week we were emphasizing that and getting board perspective and input and seeing where folks were about different pieces of this. And what I thought I heard last week is that we were in agreement on, we had the specific changes proposed from the superintendent for the policy, and I thought we we're in agreement on everything except the issue of the order of the sibling preference and the low-income set-aside. And we talked about that for quite some time, and it was pretty clear that there was, so I thought we all were clear on where we were and what we supported.
And I would also remind,
as clear as
I would
mud.
also remind everybody, all my colleagues, that we may not be in agreement on a number of different things, but it takes 4 people to agree to change what we've already got in the policy. So,
Well,
while we may be happy to listen to additional changes that you've come up with since last week, Director Buell, I don't know that there are 4 people who will agree with any of your changes.
so should I put forward that particular change, say? And should I ask the questions here? I mean, I have a lot of problem.
What is it?
I have a lot of problem with
If you could
coming forward with a
specifically-
actual wording and then not being allowed to comment on the wording.
If you can, would you specifically comment on the wording, and that's all? So go ahead.
But you can't
What
ask
wording would you
questions
like
about
changed?
things that are in here?
We're already through that part of our discussion on this policy. You can do that next week when we have a second reading.
No,
So
we
could I-
can't, because that will derail the entire process. Last week was, I mean, we
Only
can
if
if
4 people agree to the change.
Okay.
I had a question on something that was added last week, which has to do with the review.
Mhm.
So on page 5 of 7, number 2 says, if after the lottery, staff identifies that there were applicants eligible for free and reduced meals up to the district average, not approved due to the number of sibling applicants, the board will review the order of preferences. So when I looked at that language, I find it very confusing. And I guess I assumed that when we come back for the final,
Mhm.
that would be a time when we might amend, but I guess I worry a little bit whether or not that amendment would be
Substantial.
too substantial. So for example, when it says the board will review the order of preferences, I don't know what that means. Review it for changes the following year, review it for changes that year. Would we
Mhm.
open up more slots? Would we
Mhm.
take out siblings and put in low and reduce? I didn't know what it meant. And the other question, of course, then is, if applicants eligible for free and reduced meals didn't get up to the district average or were not approved. Okay, that's a different question.
We did have a brief discussion with staff about whether this particular section, since it was just added at the last meeting, if
Should
there
be
was
part
a
of the-
consensus for that at the board, would it be substantial? And staff indicated that it was not.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So-
So
Yeah.
we could potentially take that out and
It could
maybe
be
put it in the
taken out and not be
resolution
considered
or something
substantial.
instead.
So, yeah, again, whether it's.
Because again, I'd like something in there, I
just
just
one at a
don't,
time, please,
it's
you
just
guys.
confusing, the way it is worded here, so.
Director Blau?
So I did receive, in preparation for last week's meeting, a copy of a written out policy proposed. And I remember our discussion about what we wanted added, what people seemed to support. And Director Regan, I read that number 2 that you just read as being responsive to what I remember our discussion about, saying, well, wouldn't we either way come back and review whether or not it was effective?
Mhm.
So that's what I interpreted that, but I know that I hear what you're saying about.
Right. It's just, it's so broad.
That was a little bit, this is a little bit different, and I think that it was added in hopes that it would encourage additional board members to vote for this particular, and I'm not sure we're gonna get there with that, but there is language in the resolution about an annual review of what we're doing, and that's really where that kind of language belongs.
And I'll just, like, if I can just reiterate that we did ask staff specifically to include this language in response to that concern, but also we clarified that it needed to be something that was not, substantial, so that if we needed to tweak it, then we could. And same, any other input from the board or from the public that we hear during the comment period, again, it's a matter of whether it's substantial or not. But again, the thrust of last week's discussion was, here's our review, here's our thinking on it, here's where we're at, and that if we need to keep this on track in order to be able to enact these changes that's been coming a long time in coming.
Have additional, Steve?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This points out where this policy is the way that we're approaching this as a board is really, in my opinion, not correct. We should be working for resolutions that are brought forward by board members and seconded and voted upon, or at least and seconded.
And that's what we're
Brought
doing
forward and
next week.
seconded, but and then after you do that, that's when you're now supposed to have a period of time to reflect upon it and allow public to contact you. But nothing has been, we don't have any resolution that's been brought forward. What we've had brought forward is a suggestion by the superintendent, which I appreciate, but we don't have a resolution that the board is making to go forward, which is where we're having the problem. That's why it doesn't work. You're supposed to work off emotions from the board when you do policy stuff. And I know people say, well, it's easier if you don't, or faster, or whatever, but it's not appropriate. It's not an appropriate way to spend $500 million of the public's money and to supervise superintendent who supervises 48,000 children's education and 6,000 employees. It's not an appropriate way to go about it. And that's where I'm having the problem. I will make my comments here, and I just would like to register my irritation, I guess, with this.
That's good, but I think that part of this has to do with a confusion over a change in policy versus resolutions. This is a change in policy, and what we're doing tonight is providing the public with opportunities to comment. That's all this is. Next week, not next week, our next meeting, we will have a resolution that incorporates this policy, and that's when we'll have the discussion about a resolution. This is strictly an opportunity to give the public notice that we are having a change in our policies and give them an opportunity to comment.
Then following the resolution, will we then have a period of time for the public to comment?
On our resolution? There will be public comment on the
That-
resolution before we vote, yes.
No, I'm talking about a period of time, not the same day. But that's it.
The
That
public
when we make
will
a
have-
resolution, and then it should
Excuse
go
me,
forward.
if you would let me answer your question. The public will have the resolution when we deliver the board packet, and they'll have an opportunity to see the resolution and comment on it before we have any vote. Yes.
I'm going to send to the board an explanation from our policy of how this is supposed to work. I hope you'll all
The
take
way
a
it's
look at it.
supposed to work is
so
exactly
you can
how
see it.
Ms. Patterson told us, and it's in the policy already.
I'll send it along.
Something else.
I'll send it along to you.
You're looking
so
at
you-
something else.
So you will get it. And is it okay? So we're not taking, theoretically here, we're not taking any questions.
Did you have
from the board.
Did you have
Yes,
a
I
change
did.
that you want to make?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us what that is?
Okay. And we're taking those this evening? Now, is this just going to be a
We'll be
change,
looking at
or
it, but-
4 people going to do it? Okay,
Nope.
if you look on page
You
1.
you can comment
Page
just
1.
like the public can, Steve.
Page 1, it's under the general policy statement. We crossed out in, I'm looking at the redlined version. We crossed out in this policy, all Portland Public School students have the right to attend their neighborhood school. We crossed that out and we moved it down, I think, is what we kind of did. But I don't remember us having a discussion based upon that we should cross out that line and put in the line, all Portland Public School students also have the right to request a transfer. I don't remember putting those in.
This was in the draft policy. This was in the draft policy that we considered last week.
I'm kind of not done. So should we put that back in? Would the superintendent suggest that we put that back in? How'd that get out of there? Because nobody talked about that.
I'll tell you what I believe, because it was in a previous draft that you looked at. It was, I think this was making the policy consistent with the special education recommendation, where there are circumstances under which a student would not be able to attend their neighborhood school because the services that they need are not there. And so what the change was to say if a student goes to a school other than their neighborhood school to access particular services, they then have the right to stay there rather than have to go return to their neighborhood school when they no longer are getting special education services. I think one of the suggestions just made in testimony was just saying, okay, get rid of the all, because the circumstance is a specific, it was trying to make it consistent with the special education.
I understand what you're
deal.
trying to
Yeah.
do. I see.
Yeah.
Can you
And
see
I
why?
get what your
Can you
concern
see
is.
why they took almost offense at this when
I
they talked
do,
to people?
because part of the whole
The whole
point
thing, that's it.
is about strengthening neighborhood schools, yes.
Okay.
But that was the technical reason, I believe,
Right.
for that change in the policy.
Could I just piggyback on that, because that's my recollection as well from listening
Earlier
to
conversation,
SACIT
yes.
conversations, that it was that the policy as it's written right now does not reflect the
inconsistent.
reality
Correct.
for special education students. So maybe that should be tweaked further, but that's what
And
I
I think-
recall is the spirit behind that.
And I agree with something that reflects the
Something.
overall commitment to
Director
neighborhood
Blau?
school, strengthening neighborhood schools, yes.
Director Blau?
I was just going to say, I appreciate you mentioning that it is somewhere else in the policy, and I get why it might want to be, but as I look through policy, a lot of our policies are really wordy, and so I appreciate it that it is in 5, admission by area of residence. Students have the right to attend neighborhood school where they reside with their parents or supervising adults, except as provided by Section 4, and Section 4, as it specifically says, where students might have to receive services outside their neighborhood.
Right.
I'm just saying, okay.
Is there another, something else?
And can I just, I'm sorry, can I do another clarification? I mean, to me, this sort of change would not be a substantive change to the policy. Maybe Ms. Patterson can weigh in on that. But, no, I just,
I don't think,
I'm
I don't think it would be substantive, but it would be inconsistent with the policy, so.
It would be inconsistent with the policy?
We just said
If you
about
left
the
the word
special ed
all.
exception, right.
Right, but I'm just saying if
Put
there
it
were,
in Portland.
if there were tweaks, I'm just trying to clarify, my interest is that we not have another year or 2 or 3 or 10 go by before we make changes we need to enrollment against the policy. So I'm just want to make sure that we're, given that we've been talking about this for many meetings and many weeks.
So your question is really about what constitutes substantive change that would mean we need another first reading.
Right.
Director Buell?
Yeah, with all due.
And I also want to just say one more time that all of this policy, except for the part that Director Regan already covered, I think is the same as the policy we discussed last week and the week before.
And you did, it was in your December 2nd board packet, your
So-
materials.
Go ahead, what's next?
With all due respect to Director Adkins, the idea of substantive change is kind of an esoteric idea. I don't think there's any such thing, but we'll move on here to this next thing. The next question I had is, Director Regan brought forward at the last meeting the idea that the neighborhood school was the default school.
That's
I
number
thought that was
6.
great. I think Mr. Curler did. I'm not sure, did you guys think that was wrong? I kind of felt that maybe there was a board feeling around that. Is that, I mean, the people on the board here tonight, I know Mr. Morton isn't here, and I can't speak for Director Curler, but my understanding was he thought that was fine.
Director Buell, did you have a specific change to the policy you wanted here?
So could I address
We're
that
not
one,
taking
Steve?
specific
After
changes
he
to the
answers.
policy. We just
it's the
talked
same
about
issue.
that. We just talked about that. We're not asking for that. We're asking for what did we think last meeting?
No, what we are asking for is if you have a specific change to the policy that you are proposing, then we would like to hear it.
Yeah, I propose that the policy should reflect that any student may go back to their neighborhood school whenever they darn well please. And I know Director Curler would support that, and he's not here, and I'll bet you Director Reagan will support that. So the question is, the other 3 people here tonight, are they willing to say that that makes sense?
Well, we'll see when we do the second reading and the resolution.
If that's how we're doing now, we can't do it the second reading because
else
it's
do
a
you have?
substantive change.
Do you have another one?
We need to talk on this. I'll come back to another one.
So could I address that? I have brought this one up several times, and when I talked to Judy Brennan about it, I think she indicated it's on the top of page 4 of 7. It would be under number 6, enrollment, where it says students shall remain in the same school or program in which they are enrolled for the school year, except in cases of extraordinary circumstances. And I think we had at one point talked about taking out the word shall and say something like students are expected to, so that the default could still be the neighborhood school. It could be a very easy wording thing. You know, we want to set an expectation that when you're making this kind of a move, we staff accordingly. And so if we did something around that word shall, and I don't exactly know what it is, and maybe Jolly could help, but it would basically say they're expected to remain in the same program, but, you know, the neighborhood school would always be basically your backup school. You're always entitled to go there.
Others?
Well,
Director
how
Buell?
do we come out with that?
I mean, I can ask
Well,
Jolly to
I
come up
mean,
with
we got
language.
basically
The
three
staff
people
has-
for it. What about a fourth?
The staff has the suggestion, and we'll find,
Well, no, but the way we've been doing the suggestions to the staff is that we're finding 4 votes here, 4 people who agree, loosey-goosey
We're not
kind of
voting.
approach.
Tonight's
We're not
date.
voting, but we're kind of finding 4 people who agree, and then going from that, the staff picks up on that and then writes it into the policy. That's what's taken place in the past, which is the way you want to do it. I think it's a hokey way to do it, but I'm fine with it, but then we need to say, okay, are there 4 people, are there one other person between Director Blau, Director Atkins, and Director Knowles that agree that we should be able to return to your own school under regular circumstances, not extraordinary, which you can push off any place.
okay, yeah. That's fine.
What
Do you have
do-
something else?
You agree with
I
that?
think there are other people here who agree with that.
Is that right?
Yeah, what I could do
Okay,
is.
sounds good, then
People
that'll
who
be in
don't
the
care.
next one, okay,
Yeah.
that's great, okay?
As long as we
And,
can keep this on track.
So I should be clear. I don't think the change needs to be made.
I don't either, but
And currently, kids, like a student can
it already
petition to
says
go back to their
extraordinary
neighborhood school.
circumstances
but-
right there, which is fine.
Well, the reason I brought it up, though, is they can petition to go back, and then they can be denied.
Shouldn't have to.
And the concern is that, to me, your neighborhood school should always be your backup school. And in fact, I don't know why we wouldn't want it to be
I'm not
backup rather than
arguing
having
it,
a
I'm
kid
just telling you that
leave.
they can get.
Rather than
How
having
many,
a
how
kid
many,
leave
how
or
many
be
schools can you try
homeschooled.
before that's up?
Well,
All of
you're
them.
expected to go to one school and.
Hundred.
I
if
guess
it
I would
doesn't
see
work,
this as
so-
part of our strengthening, improving, and the petition process and having that feedback loop and review of what reasons came up for petitions and what the outcomes were. So-
I think it has the possibility to really destabilize neighborhood schools. If, for example, we're considering neighborhood schools as a backup, so let's say this year I petition into a focus option for a reason, or I lottery in for a reason, and I get that, and then I turn out I don't like the teacher, or something's really not fitting. So then I go back to my neighborhood school, and now my classroom just grew, and say there are 2 or 3 other kids that did the same thing. And then next year they realize, well, maybe this is a better fit, so they lottery into another focus option school. And so just what it winds up doing is the neighborhood winds up being really inconsistent. So it's not that I'm opposed to kids going to their neighborhood school, it's just I think that it could set up an unexpected consequence or result.
I don't think we're typically talking about very many cases, and the question is, would we rather lose a student to homeschool or altogether? Or would we rather have them stay within Portland Public Schools? And the fact of the matter is, neighborhood schools are always having some movement in and out. So this isn't any different. The question would be, why should somebody, move from California to Bridal Mile and be able to get a spot at the neighborhood school when a kid who's already in Portland Public Schools can't come back if it's not the right situation? So, I mean, to me, it's not a big change. It's just acknowledging that your neighborhood school is always your neighborhood school. That's all I'm trying to do with that. So, it's the only reason I brought it up. I think in the 12 years I've been on the board, I've heard of it happening like 2 times, and they weren't allowed to go back. And I think in both cases, they ended up leaving that school anyway, which to me is pretty destabilizing. So I don't know why we wouldn't consider something like this. I mean, our whole idea is to get kids back at some level to appreciate their neighborhood school, and if a kid wants to go back, we ought to encourage that.
So my understanding is that you, Director Blau, want to keep the word extraordinary? And you, Director Atkins, wants to keep
I'm comfortable
extraordinary?
with the language the way it
And
is.
you, Director Knoll?
I'm fine with it the way it
Okay,
is,
then
too.
there'd be only basically 3 people. 'Cause
Well,
I'm
we'd have
sure,
to check with
I'm sure
Matt.
Director Morton probably go along with you guys on that. Okay. Let me see if I had another question.
And thank you, Director Buell, for bringing that up. I had brought it up several times, and I forgot to.
I would like to say that I'm also, well, I'm convinced that it's very necessary within the language focus option schools, Richmond, particularly Richmond, and though I think if you do Richmond, you also have to do Ainsworth, that I'm convinced that what the superintendent has put forth is the correct way to approach it. I'm not as convinced on the other schools. I would love to have a discussion around that with the board, but we're not having it tonight, and I don't guess we're not having it next time we vote. Is that when we have that discussion? I want to have a lengthy discussion with people involved and stuff. I guess I could call that myself.
Is there a reason we didn't have the discussion last week or the week before when this was being discussed? You just like to wait?
Greg, as you go along in something like this, you listen to a lot of people. I've had 250 different people talk to me. I've reached out to people and asked people to call me and let's talk who are on the other side of the fence from where I've been. So as you move along in things, you like to have discussion. We limited and cut down discussion on this policy way beyond anything that I felt that we should. We should have been having huge meetings in the public on this policy that we didn't. We should have been having dialogue where we were just allowing people 2 minutes to talk. And I know a lot of people pushed and didn't want to do that because it would bring about more thinking around it. And I don't mean people on the board, I mean people in the public who thought, okay, well, let's go with this, da-da-da. But really, we needed to do that. We haven't done that. So as I go along and talk to people on my own over a period of time, you maybe move a little bit as you get smarter on an issue. I don't want to think that I'm the smartest guy in the room here. I'm the only guy that knows stuff.
So wouldn't that be true?
But and so I've listened to people, and I'm going, boy, we really need to talk some more about that, the focus option sibling preference and how that works, and could we come up with a way that maybe is better than it is in this policy. I'm willing to consider talking to people on that. And in the long run, I was the fourth person who voted for it, kind of. So since I was the fourth person who voted opposite it, and so I'm offering that out there as kind of a
I recall you bringing that up at the last meeting, Steve, and nobody had anything else to say, so. Director Blau?
Yeah, but I was the one that voted that direction. I voted that direction, see.
No, I don't think I had anything else. I was just, I guess, thinking that a similar discussion about the enrollment patterns has been prevalent in our communities for a long time about the inequities, and so I don't see this as shutting down conversation. I just think that sometimes we can talk for the next 2 years about this and probably learn some new stuff. So I'm surprised that that we didn't have these discussions for the past month when we've been hearing about it. So I hear that your process is different than.
You might remember though
that
we.
Stop. Director Atkins.
Okay, then I'll talk to you.
So I also recall that you brought this up, suggestion up last week in our discussion about the proposed policy, Director Buell, and as I hope I made it clear last week, my preference around the preferences was absolutely to have a different outcome than but we had a majority of the board who felt differently. But when you brought up the sort of alternative of could we have the Richmond or similar programs to be, the reason I didn't agree with that, one reason I didn't agree with that is for me, I'm not comfortable with calling out specific, having specific schools or types of programs differentiated that way further within the policy. To me, it needs to be a blanket policy. So I appreciated that you brought forward sort of a different nuance on it, but I wasn't supportive of it. I didn't hear others as well. So I feel like we discussed that and it didn't rise to the top as something that got the majority support. So I thought we'd already discussed that, I guess.
Director Buell?
Thank you, Greg, for what you said, but and I'm sure you've had enough discussion over the years on it. You were here when they went through the Northeast Coalition stuff that they did, and I'm sure you had lots of people complaining about it or whatever. And I wasn't here in that, and so I felt the need for more discussion, board discussion, and I look at it as board discussion in the public, not in the back room discussion. And last week, you'll remember that the discussion was cut off. The board discussion, when I tried to go on, was cut off. And this week, we started with the declaration that there isn't any discussion this week. So to say that we've had plenty of discussion, I can't agree with you on that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. The next item on our agenda is the budget update. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, so Yusuf Awad, our Chief Financial Officer, and David Wine, Budget Director, will provide this update and report.
The future budget or the budget past?
Good evening, Board of Directors, Superintendent Smith, and student representatives. What we're going to do in the following few slides, we will provide you a budget update for the current fiscal year, 14-15. The budget update was promised in our September budget review. The purpose of the budget update is really to provide specific updates for certain items in our revenues. And we will cover the following topics in the following few slides. The property taxes update based on assessed valuation changes that happen, and we have more updated information about that. Our student counts, we have gotten more updated numbers from the state. The state school fund allocation or appropriation, as things change in the budget overall, the amount of money that's available in the state budget gets reallocated to the schools, and that number continue to change throughout the fiscal year. Our local option, and we will provide information about the budget amendments that we will bring forward in January, as well as we will do just a snapshot about the governor budget for 15-17. We're not going to go in a lot of details on that. We're just going to give you just an overview of what's the proposal. Just to kind of give an overview for the public of how funding works in terms of the formula funding that the state school funds. In simple terms, it's the formula funding equal the local option or the local permanent taxes plus the state school fund grant that we get from the state. There are three factors in particular that affect the allocations that we get. The assessed valuation, as the assessed valuation goes up, the local option or the local permanent amount of money that we get in the formula goes up, and that will reduce the amount of money we get from the state. It does not necessarily change the overall funding for the district. It could, depending on how assessed evaluations across the state is changing. The second item is the student counts as we grow, and if we grow in a fashion that's greater than the rest of the school districts in the state of Oregon, then our appropriation will increase. The third one is the amount of money that is available in the appropriation in the state level. If that amount is increased or we have more resources because of other school districts, enrollment may have gone down or their assessed valuation changed, we may have an opportunity to receive a little bit more money than we have received in the beginning of the year. We will go in a little bit more details in the next few slides, and David will cover those. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. So firstly, on our permanent rate property taxes, in the adopted budget, we had $195.5 million. And in the light of the information we got from County Assessor in November, we're revising that estimate up to $199 million. And quite simply, the one factor that really drove that was the assessed value increase. So you can see here the number for assessed value increase for the last 4 years. In the most recent year, assessed value increase was 4.48, almost 4.5%. That's a remarkably high number and significantly higher than last year. We've reported these higher tax receipts to, or expected higher tax receipts to ODE, so they can revise the state school fund estimate. and we will revise those numbers again in the spring once we actually have a better sense of collections. The single largest property tax receipt we get is in November, but a lot of people pay monthly, and so we'll be updating our estimates once we see how collections pan out over the year. As Yusuf mentioned, the second number that we revise is our student numbers, and there's 3 sets of numbers here. So when we adopted the budget, we had an estimate for student numbers. That's the one in the middle. And we've revised that estimate of student numbers based on actual head count in our schools. And we've also, so we take the head count and then we have a retention rate to come up with an average daily membership. You can see our kindergarten number was freakishly accurate. On behalf of the data and policy analysis team, do not hold them to that level of consistent accuracy. Grades 1 through 8 were a little bit lower in reality than we'd estimated, and some of that's some charter school numbers which were a little lower, and that was offset by high school numbers that were a little higher. Net, we're about 40 students lower than we had estimated in the adopted budget, but 500 up from the prior year. Again, we have reported these numbers to ODE so that they can revise the state school fund numbers for us. So update on the state school fund. As Yusuf reminded everyone, the state school fund is funded by statewide local revenue, mostly those permanent rate property taxes, plus the legislative appropriation. And then it's allocated out to districts by formula, which is based upon ADMW, the average weighted daily membership. So total formula revenue is the number they calculate, and then we collect the local revenue, and that's topped up with a grant from ODE. So in the adopted budget, we had $393,974,197, and usually I round those numbers up, but in this particular case, I wanted you to see the exact dollar amount. And that was $200 million of local revenue and almost $194 of state school fund grant. So we told them we've got more permanent rate taxes, and these are our student numbers, and so they revised the estimate to $393,986,766. So after all that moving around, we are scheduled to get an extra $12,000 of state school fund revenue, which we're very excited about. And essentially what's happened is we collect $3.5 million more locally, and that is offset by $3.5 million less of state school fund grant. So we wanted to illustrate this relationship. You may recall when we were talking about our beginning fund balance, ending fund balance, that trade-off of you get more money in one place and so you're going to get less money in another. This is a perfect illustration of how that works. So unless the overall formula revenue changes, what happens when we collect more money locally on the permanent rate is it's offset by a reduced grant from ODE. Local option is a different matter because that's money that we collect locally and we keep and we do not put into the state school fund calculation. In our adopted budget, we had $57.2 million, and our revised estimate, now that we know what the county assessor has put out there, is $61 million. You will remember that local option taxes are subject to the Measure 5 limit of $5 per thousand for education on the market value of a property, and local option levies can increase taxes up to that limit on market value. Effectively, we tax the gap between assessed value and market value, and compression is that fun concept that gets in the way between those. So why was our local option revenue this year higher than we had forecast? So the first thing is, again, assessed value growth was higher, so that increases local option revenue. And the other thing that happened was market value growth in some of the properties in the district resulted in reduced compression. So compression is how much of the notional amount of tax we would collect do we not collect because of that Measure 5 limit. And what you can see on this slide is the numbers over the last 4 years. And these are the 4 years since we increased the local option rate. Because when we increased the rate from 75 cents to $1.99, that dramatically increased the compression. So in 2011, it was 29.6. It rose to a high of 34.4% when we were effectively losing almost $28 million. It was down last year, and an even greater decrease in that compression reduction this year. Here's a couple of charts that show that more graphically. And you can see there's always been a level at which we have not collected the full amount of the local option. And more recently, in this most recent year, it's getting better. One of the things that's important to recognize for us, like any district that has a local option, it's a great thing to be able to collect more revenue and be able to keep that revenue locally. But the whole compression factor really does increase the volatility of our revenue. If and when we go into another recession, we're going to suffer not just the impact through the state school fund, but most likely we're going to see compression turn around, and so our local option revenue is also subject to a downturn, and that's something that we're going to have to bear in mind as we build budgets, build reserves, and things like that going forward. So just to confirm where we are with budget amendments, you heard from Cherie Lewis and the CPAs over the last couple of meetings when they did the CAFA. One of the things that was in there was it confirmed that our beginning fund balance this year was higher than we had originally budgeted by that $16.8 million. In meetings earlier this year, you have confirmed the plans to provide additional school staffing and high school support, which used $3.5 million of that amount. Blessed investment in support of the 3 priorities, some of which was ongoing, some of which was one-time. Strategic one-time investments in support of improved outcomes for students and effective operations, and increasing our uncommitted contingency to 4.5% of expenditures. The increase in the facilities capital budget, which was almost $1.8 million of the one-time money, was actually approved in a budget amendment in November. We will be bringing a budget amendment to you in January, which will reflect the higher revenue from local option and permanent levies that I just talked about, the revised state school fund figures, other full balancing adjustments since the budget was adopted, and the remainder of those impacts of the beginning fund balance revision. So that will be January. And then finally, the governor's proposed a budget for the state for the 15-17 biennium, and included in that are some provisions for K-12 education. He proposed $6.9 billion in spending for K-12 education. That number includes $220 million to fund full-day kindergarten, to fund the second half of full-day kindergarten that is not currently funded by the state. His proposal includes 4 funding formula changes that will impact the way that the state school fund is allocated to districts, and also includes several possible additional carve-outs, which are pots of money that are taken off the top of the state school fund before the formula allocation. Because of those funding formula changes and possible additional carve-outs, it's hard at this point to say exactly what the governor's budget proposal would translate into for an individual school district. We've worked with other districts across the state to estimate what current service level is, and I think you know that, but for folks at home, current service level is our estimate of what would it cost us to do what we're currently doing in the next biennium. And the consensus for that, including the addition of full-day kindergarten, is $7.5 billion. And as another number to bear in mind that's come up in conversations is the 10-year glide path to the QEM. So the quality education model has a funding level, and if you asked what would that, to get from where we are today to the QEM over 10 years, what would the first 20% increment of that be? That would be $7.875 billion. So there's some background on the governor's proposal. And with that, that's what we have.
Dr. Buell, did you have a question?
2. The first one is, did you say we had more money than we thought we had? I mean, do we have some money we could spend on reading teachers the second half of the year? And still fulfill our commitments into the contingency?
So I did say that we expect to collect more revenue this year than we had originally forecast, yes.
But I mean, that's different than the money that we already, the $16.8 million, do we have money beyond that $16.8 million, do you think? I mean, are you estimating that? The answer is no?
No.
No, okay, fine. I kind of misunderstood what you said.
No, he was just recapping the 16 million that was talked about in September.
Fine, that's what I wanted, just wanted to double check here. The other question I have, let's go back to governor's budget if we can. The 220 million funding for full-day kindergarten, is that, how much will that pay of what that will cost us to fund full-day kindergarten beyond where we are? Have we figured that out yet? Do we know that?
We have a rough estimate of that.
What is that?
So it's actually relatively easy for us to estimate how much the second half of kindergarten costs, because we're actually spending that right now through parent tuition and Title I. In this year's budget, we're spending about $10.5 million for that second day of kindergarten. And we think that next year, when you roll up additional costs and things like that, it's going to cost us approximately $11 million for that second half day of kindergarten. If you take $220 million over the biennium, and you take 49% the first year, and you take 8.2% of that, because we're about that percentage of the state, it's about $8.6 million. So it doesn't get us all of the way to where we would be. Part of that is a function of the fact that we have class size policy in place for staffing in kindergarten, and so we probably have higher levels of staffing for kindergarten than some folks do. But the answer to your question is our share of $220 million doesn't quite get us to our cost of the second half of full-day kindergarten.
And do we also have to figure in the fact that that money would be taken out of what we would normally get anyway? Is that how you look at the budget? Right. Is that how we're looking at the budget? In other words, it's not only that that the 220 million won't fund it, but it's actually taken out of our own money, right?
Well, the $7.5 billion number we have up there for current service level includes the cost of full-day kindergarten. So what we're saying is, what we and districts across the state are saying is, if the legislature were to fund K-12 education at $7.5 billion, that for most school districts, on average, that would be enough money to do what we're doing this year, next year, and to provide full-day kindergarten.
I think, Director Buell, are you asking if the 220 million is included in the 6.9 billion?
It is.
It is.
Right. So yes.
So we're paying for our own by getting less money from the state. So we're actually paying for our own kindergarten. They're not really paying for it because they haven't added any additional funds.
That's correct.
Around.
That's
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So okay.
At this point, it's important to acknowledge the governor's budget proposal is just that.
Yeah, exactly. I just like to get it straight.
It's early in the process.
But I appreciate you bringing that up, because he's saying that he is funding full-day kindergarten, and I think your clarification is a really
So we're funding them. And the next part. There a couple other questions. One, there's three formula changes that he's talked about in his budget. Can you explain what those formula changes are and how they affect Portland Public Schools?
I think
this
we'll wait.
This is the place to do that.
Well, but staff doesn't really come prepared for that tonight, Steve.
He haven't looked at that?
We did look at it.
Okay.
At this point, it's not really clear what the output or what the outcome on our districts is going to be, because as the governor presented the budget, it's not really clear how it's going to be carved out or calculated. We know one simple change in terms of proposed for ELL, the weight. It will be a negative impact on us, but we have not really done the full analysis to really present this to the board, and I would rather not go through it today. We can bring it as we have more details.
It's okay with the superintendent. I'd love to have you come back and make that analysis of those particular things, and also love to have you come back and talk about where that other money is going to affect us, because the governor's budget is $870 million. I mean, yes, $870 million above. It's over almost $800 million above where the governor had pulled out the money last time. I was at the Oregon Educational Investment Board meeting and heard him give his discussion, and heard almost nobody question what the situation was. I'd like to know what our specific effect, the governor's proposal, would be our specific effect on us, and then if it's a bad effect, we should be sending our lobbyists down there and to kick some heads about having an effect on us. Except we also have this other section about the CBOs, the community-based organizations, which we send kids to, which will be getting more money. So that's another factor. How are we going to be affected by the CBO money that's spent that direction too? I mean, how does this governor's budget affect us?
Steve,
That's what I'd like to know.
Director Buell, these are all really important questions.
Thank you.
We all want the answers to them. This forum, with staff that's not prepared for this kind of thing, is not the place to do it. We are going to have many, many budget discussions, and anything that you want to hear about, you should be sure to talk to the superintendent about, so that she can make sure that staff brings that information forward so that they're prepared to answer questions in a really
Anything or just
manner.
surrounding the
And
budget?
as far as the legislative work goes, we already have approved a legislative platform that specifically speaks to the budget and our dissatisfaction with the governor's current budget.
But
So
we don't
are-
have the facts to speak
we
to
are-
it until these gentlemen and the superintendent bring those
Exactly.
facts forward.
Exactly. And they
And it
will.
doesn't get out in the public unless we do that, and I know you're willing to
And
do that.
we are going to do that. It's
That's
just
fine.
not
I
going
just-
to be
We will do
tonight.
I'm not an unreasonable person. I'm just saying that these are questions that we need to be prepared to answer.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, maybe we would
Yep.
have been tonight, but whatever.
No, this is
I'm-
not the
I'm
purpose of this tonight.
So are we
So
going to
thank you.
then, on the next, can we have this report on the next agenda?
No, it's not on the next agenda.
How
but
about
it
the
is
agenda
on a
after
coming
that?
agenda. You know, I don't have them in front of me, Steve, but I will let you know.
How
okay?
about if I make a motion to put it on the agenda after the next?
It might be helpful to clarify too what else we expect to happen in terms of budget proposals. Because the next step after the governor's budget proposal is that we expect the co-chairs of Ways and Means to come up with a budget proposal, I believe in mid-January, which will be the next iteration. And it may well be, you know, we're hopeful that that will be a number that's closer to the $7.5 billion, and that may well be an opportune time to sort of do some more figuring out about exactly how things look. I will say that we are planning to have a more detailed budget forecast for this district for next year in January. And so at that point, I think not only will we have a better sense of our own numbers, because the 7.5 there is a consensus statewide number, and we'll have a better sense of the landscape in Salem because of the co-chair's proposal.
Okay. Director Buell?
Thank you very much. I just think it's really important that you guys are very good. I mean, you guys last week we had this, you guys did an audit and didn't have any problems at all. We're the biggest school district in the state of Oregon. And I think we have a responsibility not only to our own taxpayers, but also to the state of Oregon as the largest school district in the state and certainly a leader in the state. One of our board members is the chairperson of the Oregon State School Board Association. Well, she will be. And so we have a responsibility to say, here's how we're affected by the governor's budget, here's how we're affected by legislative stuff, and we need to stay on top of it, and we need to keep this board informed so we know exactly what's going on, and we can then lobby according to our lobby, which was to say we want more money, and we can say you're not giving us enough money here in this budget, only if we have the responsibility. And you've said you'll do that.
We have already said numerous times that that's exactly what we're going to do, Steve. So thank you very much
The
for saying
timing
it yet
is
again.
important too.
Director Atkins.
I was just simply going to say that I think everyone completely agrees with you, Director Buell. I mean, I think the assumption that, of course, we're going to be very aggressively, very visibly, consistently, both in our own internal work and in Salem, going to be bringing forth all these issues, of course. So thank you.
Again. Director Regan.
And I would agree with that too. The other thing is that I think we know, at least from tradition, and I don't understand why the governor does this, but we know that the governor's budget is always kind of the floor, or at least that's how it appears. And so I find that it's probably not worth getting too completely worked up about the governor's budget. I think once the co-chair's budget comes out, you know, then it's all hands on deck. But even having said that, you know, I did go down, Steve, last week and testify with Beaverton and with Salem to the Senate Education Committee, and we talked very specifically about the impact of the governor's budget and what that would mean for us. We talked about the need for special ed funding increases, especially around our high-cost special ed students. We talked about the need for additional ELL funding, English emerging bilingual funding, and especially with the fact that we have so many refugee students and so many different languages when you look at the large districts. Thank you. We talked about the need for facilities matching funds from the state, career technical education and the expansion of that. So there was a whole variety of things that we specifically talked about needing, but we also made it very clear that we were talking about those in addition to what's the state school fund number. So if you do any of those as carve-outs, all you're doing is shuffling within a set budget. What we're looking for is we need the current service level, and then we need additional investments in some very specific areas where we can really accelerate what we're doing for these students. So, you know, I think that testimony was really well received. I appreciate the fact that, to my knowledge, it was one of the first times that OSBA's brought the big three districts together, and Chair Haas and others seemed very pleased. They said they hear a lot from smaller and rural districts, and so it was really good to hear from the bigger districts in a unified way. And I'm also hoping during the year that we'll have the opportunity to have big districts and small districts testified together, because in fact many of our issues are very similar. It's just a matter of scope. So I share, Steve, all of your concerns. I know you do. Yeah, and I think that we have time. Again, to get too caught up in the governor's budget right now, to me, I mean, we could make a point that it's really absurdly low, but it's not. You know, to me, it's not really where we really need to focus our attention on the legislature and what they're going to be doing. And so, anyway, thank you for bringing it up there.
Okay, the board will now move on to our business agenda. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your testimony and your presentation. The board will now consider the remainder of its business agenda, having already voted on Resolution 5004. Ms. Houston, are there any changes to the business agenda?
There is not.
No. Do I have a motion and a second for the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director Belisle moves and Director Atkins seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
No.
Is there board discussion? Director Belisle.
I just want to point out that there's funding in here for Multnomah County school-based health clinics or some health services. And I just want to note that I'm work for Multnomah County. There's not a conflict of interest. There's not a potential conflict of interest. Just wanted to highlight it.
That you have a job with Multnomah County.
Good going.
Great. Dr. Buell?
I'd like to, you want me to make a motion to segregate something out?
Well, it depends. What do you want to say
I
about
want
it?
to segregate out the part about the Chromebooks.
We can have discussion first if you'd rather.
I want to make I'd like to segregate that out, and then I'd like to make a motion around that.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay. It's not our, so which one are you in?
Oh,
Find it for
right
me?
here.
What page is at the bottom? 8?
Page 6. 8.
Page 8, the micro K-12 contractor. The 1.2 million for
This one?
1.2 million for the Chromebooks.
Okay. We'll go ahead and set that one aside. If we have, you're moving it. Do we have a second for Director Buell's motion?
Yeah. Second. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see how we do this again. So we'll pull it out and it'll be 5006. Is that right? Okay. So the board will now vote on the business agenda with the exception of 5006. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. With any abstentions, the business agenda is approved by a vote of 5-0 with Student Representative Jaswal voting. Okay. Director Buell, do you want to go ahead and speak to your
I'd like
micro
to,
K-12?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we table the purchase of these Chromebooks until we've had a report from the superintendent surrounding how we decide who gets what books, how involved these books are with the testing and what that cost, is that a direct cost, and the Wi-Fi concerns that people have raised for about a half a year in this school district.
Okay, so we already have a resolution pulling this out, so what you are doing is basically testifying about why you think we should vote
Oh, I thought you just
no
pulled it.
on this.
No, I thought you just pulled it out.
Right? Hmm?
Yeah.
We do, it's out.
Okay, so I'm
So
saying.
you want people to vote no
Right.
on passage
Okay,
of
I
this
guess we could.
particular
I could take
agenda
it.
item, is that
I
correct?
I could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Great.
fine. Want me to redo it?
No.
Okay.
We've got it.
Okay. I want to vote
Is there any
no with the
discussion?
idea that I would vote yes after we had a report on this.
Is there a discussion?
I think
There's
we need
no
to get it on the
second yet.
table, don't we?
I think we already, we pulled it out and it had a second, so I think it's on the table.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Discussion, other discussion? You have more?
Well, I could discuss more.
Go ahead.
Because different. This is a lot of money, over $1 million, and I just want to make, I just think it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we're clear on how this is taking place and why we want Chromebooks and why we want to spend $1 million in those and how this affects the testing. I think it's something that should be, we should have a public report on, because I think there's a lot of conflict surrounding this issue.
So Josh Klein, our Chief Information Officer, is available if anyone wanted to ask questions about this particular item. So just to let you know. Yeah.
I would love to hear.
Josh, want to come up and, not quite sure.
You can ask questions now. I just didn't think they would have the answers.
I may not, we'll see. Director Buell?
Josh Klein, Chief Information Officer. So Director Buell, thank you for the question. I do have a...
Which one do you got?
I've got, I think it's answers to all of them. So,
Oh, good.
So first of all, the $1.2 million is an operationalization. We're operationalizing a purchase of a budget item that was approved in the adopted budget. So there was a budget item for over $1 million for school-based technology. So this is executing on a budget item that was already in the adopted budget.
But it wasn't specifically for Chromebooks.
It was for school-based technology.
Right, school-based technology. That's how, I guess my concerns are on the Chromebooks themselves.
Another answer to your question about how we're going to distribute the technology, there's currently a district-wide wall-to-wall IT asset inventory, which was also approved by the board recently. That inventory is currently underway, and we're, I think, close to half done with it now. And the results of that inventory are going to be used to determine how the Chromebooks are distributed. They'll be distributed to schools in an effort to bring all schools to an 8-to-1 student-to-device ratio. So schools with less technology will receive more Chromebooks.
8-to-1, and is that all 3 levels of the, well, really there's 4 levels of our schools. That's
across all schools, all sites.
K-12, 8-to-1.
Across all sites.
Okay,
correct. And then with respect to the use of the equipment, so this is really a digital equity initiative. So it's bringing digital equity to all of our sites as best we can at this point. So we're providing internet access and technology access to the students as equitably as we can. And the devices can be used both for personalized learning, differentiated instruction, as well as assessment. So the assessment is a piece of it, but it is only a smaller piece.
And the play that the testing plays in this purchase?
So, I mean, as I said, the devices can be used for testing.
Are we doing it because of the testing, or are we doing it because because we want technology in all the classrooms. I mean, because one of the things we do, of course, is we shut down our technology for up to 3 or 4 months in some cases. I think I talked to a principal that was shut down for 3 months, the technology, based upon the testing. So is this going to, does this allow us to keep the other testing, I mean, the other technology open maybe? I mean, how does this, I mean, you're kind of shaking your head, but have we talked about this? And
We've talked about it quite a bit. You know, it's going to vary by site on the strategy they use for testing. But the additional technology will help reduce the number of testing days needed at many of the sites, and potentially, you know, let fixed labs stay open more.
And then the last question is on Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi, good. So,
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt and make a little statement here. I read an article recently that talked about that Wi-Fi is accumulative, so if you have 30 kids using Wi-Fi at the same time, that increases the negative effects of the Wi-Fi. Have we worked on that or looked at that? What are we doing around that?
So with wireless internet, there's considerations for both coverage and density. So you need to have coverage across the entire school, but also you need to be concerned about the density or concentration of devices in a certain part of the school. We've done quite a bit of work around this. In fact, we recently, in the fall, completed a district-wide wireless survey of all of our sites. So we have really good data now about where there are density and coverage issues at all of our sites, and we're going to be preparing some information to bring to you in January around what a budget request would look like, you know, to fix some of those issues. With specifically around this purchase includes wireless access points on every cart. So we're talking about 80 carts of Chromebooks here. The cart has a wireless access point on it, and when that cart is rolled into a classroom or to a space, it needs to be plugged in. That access point needs to be plugged in to the wall, and then that supplements the wireless network in the school.
So I'm not sure if I made myself real clear. What I was concerned about is, have we done any work around have we taken a position on the negative effects that people keep talking about all over the world? I mean, you know, France has pretty much cut down their Wi-Fi technology in their schools. Have we done, what are we doing surrounding that topic? Anything in the district that you're aware of? In other words, coverage is fine, but maybe you don't want coverage because you have this problem. I don't know. I'm not an expert in Wi-Fi. I don't understand it. I'm hoping we have somebody within the district who does. I don't know. What have we done around that issue? Anything that you could send me or anything?
We're not doing anything around that this time.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the answers.
Mr. Klein, is our technology unsafe for our students?
No, it is not.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I got an answer. So you're telling me that you're guaranteeing that Wi-Fi is safe?
I'm telling you that in my opinion, our technology
in your opinion, Wi-Fi is perfectly safe?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the, okay.
Okay. Okay, shall we
Thank you.
Now, any other discussion about 5006 on micro K-12? Dr. Atkins?
I'll just say I'm really excited to make this investment in technology for our kids.
And provide equity across the district. Our technology, yep. Okay, the board will now vote on resolution 5006. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining based on the fact that we haven't looked at, I don't think.
The business
carefully
agenda is
looked at
approved
the,
by a vote of 4 to 1. 4 to 0 with 1 abstention and Student Representative Jaswal voting.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next meeting of the board will be on Tuesday, January 6th. And from all of us at the board, we wish you happy holidays. We're adjourned.